Shalom. Hello, everyone. Let's start healing. I'm Adrianne Murchison, and thank you for returning to our Let's Start Healing podcast. Everyone pretty much knows shalom, I hope. That is hello, goodbye, peace in Hebrew. Shalom. What we say here is we have more in common than we think. And what we have in common can change the world. Before we get started, I invite you to like us on Facebook, follow us on Instagram, send me an email at letstarthealingpodcast@gmail.com. And you can listen to all of our episodes on the Let's Start Healing podcast channel on YouTube and also at Apple Podcasts. So much to talk about and not enough time, but one thing that I want to share is that a near future episode of Let's Start Healing will focus on When They See Us, the miniseries on Netflix. And that episode may be a little shorter than usual, but that miniseries was heart-wrenching and incredible at the same time. For me, and I'm very interested in knowing what you thought about it, how you experienced it, if you saw it. I've talked to people who've seen it and haven't seen it. Some folks don't want to see it because they think they're not ready for it and they can't handle it. And I want to get into all of that on an upcoming episode. So email me your thoughts about that, or if you want to be included in that podcast at Let's Start Healing podcast@gmail.com. This episode today is going to turn the tables a little bit. I am actually going to be interviewed, so you can get to know a little about me. Lanada Chanel Duncan, who was interviewed in and featured in episode 8, is going to do the dirty work today, and she is going to interview me. And yes, I did feel a little exposed in the experience. I do understand now how it is when I'm talking to guests, and how it's a very personal thing to share your spiritual side, to share what you really believe, and wonder if it's going to be accepted. And it's just personal. So I have a higher and even higher gratefulness for the guests who are on this podcast. And I truly do see our guests on this podcast as healers. My spiritual path, I didn't share this in the interview, but it's been interesting for me as a person who has always only seen God as love. And I can pretty much recall being very young. I mean, I might have been 6 or 7 when something in my spirit just only saw God as love. I mean, I grew up and I remember taking classes for First Communion because I grew up Catholic. I remember taking classes for First Communion, or taking religion classes in school. And, there was God. We would learn that there was God and there was the devil. And the devil was scary to me and also didn't make sense to me. It just didn't make sense, because either God is love or God isn't love. Either God is all love or he's not. And so if he's all love, which is what I was being taught, then I didn't see where the devil fit in. And because I didn't like to be scared, I chose not to believe in the devil. And believe me, that has caused problems for people in my life, which I'll talk about in a second. But I remember, now it's a definite belief, but I can remember when I was making that choice as a little girl. And one day, when I was little, my parents had a friend who was an artist. And this artist was coming over to, I guess, do a portrait of me. And they but they didn't characterize it as that. They characterized it as this person is coming over to paint me. And so I didn't understand what that meant. I was like, well, he's going to paint me. Well, what is he going to paint me? What color is he going to paint me? Is he going to paint me a different color? And so I remember my dad thinking that that was a ridiculous question. And he was just like, yeah, he's going to paint you a different color. And I said, well, what is he going to paint me? I don't want to be a different color. Is he going to paint me green? I mean, what kind of color is he going to paint me green? And so something came around like I identified green, which happens to be one of my favorite colors. But at that time as a little girl, I had identified green as the devil. Maybe I had seen some pictures or something and the devil was green. And so my father was playing with me, but I didn't realize he was. And he said something like to the effect of, my face, like if I want to see the devil, that's what I remember. I want to see the devil? And if you want to see the devil, go look in the mirror. And I went and I looked. The stove had these little mirrors, on the side. And so I went on the side of the stove and I looked at my reflection. And I'm afraid as I'm approaching this little mirror, and I'm a little girl, of what I'm going to see. And then I see myself and I just start crying. And so my parents and, one of my brothers was there at the time, I think. And, they just laughed. And, I went and dove into my mother's chest in tears. And it was just, I remember that so vividly because it was a choice for me to not believe in the devil. The devil was scary. And then cut to, so let's say on the safe side, I was 5 or 6 then. And so I would say 6. So cut to 2012, okay? Or 11, 12, 2011, 12. And I am dating someone very early in knowing this person, and I'm starting to have deep feelings for this person, and it's about 6 weeks in, and my feelings are really growing, and I think we're enjoying each other's company, and this person is Catholic and practicing Catholic, goes to church every Sunday, and I am deeply rooted in my spirituality and my relationship with God. And I don't go to Catholic church every week, but I go to church. I do enjoy going to church on Good Friday. Often I love going to church. I love going to church often on Christmas Eve. It was a tradition that my mom and I had. And then just in daily life, because Catholic churches are open usually all day long and there's mass all day long, I might go to church. I might go to a noon mass, or I might just go into church during the course of a day and sit in a pew and pray. And so that's just a little idea of, my walk of life. Okay. So, I'm talking to this gentleman who I'm in a relationship with, and somehow we start talking about God, and I bring up how I don't believe in the devil and I don't believe in hell. It's just not a part of my belief system. And the next day, he broke up with me, and it was painful. It was painful. If that happened to me today, it wouldn't be painful, but that was painful, and it hurt so much because God is such a huge part of me, and for someone to reject me because I believe in the love of God and not the fear of God was, it really, really hurt. It took a minute for me to get past, and to think that I wasn't good enough. This person had a daughter who I had not met, and didn't think that I was good enough to be around their child, because they thought I might impart something, he thought I might impart something to his child that, was incorrect. So it's a journey to share. It's a journey that I have been on, and to be at this place with this podcast, and to be able to talk to people, to present to you, the audience, the listeners, to present to you people from all different walks of life, from all different spiritual paths, who have a love of God, but you can still relate to them, even if you don't believe the same things that they believe. If you love God coming from the space that you're in, and they love God coming from the space that they're in, and you can relate to what a guest is saying, I just think that for me, that is just the greatest gift. It's the greatest gift to be a part of this conversation, and to bring this kind of conversation out here to the stratosphere. So in any case, there's more to come. There's more that I want to share with you beyond this aspect of the episode that you hear. There's more to me than this part of my spirituality. But in the meantime, thank you for listening, and let's get started. Let's start healing. Hi, Lanada.
Hello, Adrianne.
Thank you so much for doing this.
Oh my God, I'm super excited about it.
Me too.
I'm super excited to flip the tables on you.
Well, what you got?
You sure you want it? Look, you sure you want to jump into this? We'll have fun with it. So, just excited to be interviewing you.
Thank you. I'm honored that you're willing to do it.
Let's see. Okay. Well, you ready to get started?
I am.
All right. Well, let's just start with first just kind of an icebreaker with this, I guess, and tell us a little bit about why you started the podcast, Let's Start Healing, and how did you come up with the name?
Gosh, I can't remember.
Probably real hard.
No. Well, the title, it just came to me. I had a name. I have a friend who has worked in radio for years, and sometimes I turn to her as a consultant.
Okay.
And I had a title that she said, no, that's not going to work. And I can't remember what it was, but it was a long title that I felt boiled down to truth is true. And she was like, no. So, and I was talking to her like maybe about 11:30 at night, 11:45. And so we hung up, and when I ended up turning off my light to go to sleep, the name just came to me, Let's Start Healing.
Wow.
So I really felt that it was divine, and it felt right. So that's what it was.
Okay.
And I really can't remember when the first idea of this podcast came to me, because a lot of people I was telling you have been saying to me, you've been talking about this for a while.
Right.
And I know I was talking about it last year, and then just earlier today, I realized that I had brought it up to someone 2 years ago.
Okay.
So my nephew and I had been talking about doing a podcast together, just about talking about everything under the sun, because that's what we do. But eventually, I guess I just realized I wanted to talk about God. Definitely early last year, I knew that I love talking about God. I really want this to be a part of my profession. I can do other things, but I just love having conversations about God. And that's because when I am in a group, I just feel this really high vibration. I feel like everyone's on the same plane, no matter what background we come from, no matter what our faiths, we all come together through this love of God.
Okay.
So
And you said when you're in a group, any particular group, or you mean just in
spiritual discussion groups?
Okay.
There's one main one that I have been attending for more than 10 years that revolves around A Course in Miracles, but I attend others as well, and so that's when I, really said, oh, I really enjoy this.
Okay.
So.
All right. Well, I do want to ask you in a minute or so about how those groups have influenced your spirituality. But first, just to continue on this particular topic, what does then the name Let's Start Healing, what does it mean for you?
Okay. Well, and I've spoken about this a little on podcast episodes in the introductions. I really think we need a healing. I think that the media puts out a sense of division in our world and in our country and in our communities. And obviously we do feel division oftentimes, but that's not all there is to it. All of us every day, we go out in our world, we go out to work, and we encounter people that don't think the way that we do about specific things, but we really connect with them. And I also think that we're at such a place in time where we are consumed by things 24/7. We get stressed out easily just by having so much on our to-do list and our many commitments. I think that we want to be real. There's a big part of us that's a larger part of us than there was, say, 10 years ago or 20 years ago, that really wants to be in a space of, in a genuine space.
Yeah.
A space that's real and not artificial.
Yeah.
So I think that we do need a healing.
Yeah. It's funny when you, as you're describing that, I'm thinking in agreement with you, like even in my spirit, because it seems like this is the time for such a program like this. It just seems like a great, certainly it could have been around for years or, 5 or 10 years ago, but it seems like right now is a good time for this type of program, for this type of podcast. And it just seems like it's time for people to really begin to, again, appreciate this type of diversity, no matter, even if it's relates to spirituality or whatever, to appreciate that, to love one another and to learn how to do that, even understanding our differences that we have, as it connects to spirituality. So
I agree.
It's timely.
Thank you. And I think even with our cell phones, I mean, if on occasion I might just turn off my cell phone, just shut it down, and it is a different experience.
Yeah.
It feels like a real disconnect. Now, I don't do that often, so I don't want to pretend that I do, but I mean, I can feel, a definite difference. So.
Yeah. Going back to something that you mentioned a few minutes ago, you mentioned that you're referring to God, and you're referring to you love to talk about God, and this was a way for you to do that. Tell me, how would you describe your perception of God?
My perception of God is that God is love.
Okay.
I know you're not surprised.
I'm not surprised that you made the connection with love, and that takes me to then to expound on that. And
Sure.
What is love?
Well, so let me say this.
Okay.
I was raised Catholic.
Okay.
That was very huge for me. I still feel a connection to Catholicism because in the Catholic Church, I felt the spirit of God. Anytime I walk into a Catholic church, I would say there's maybe once in a blue moon, I might walk into a Catholic church and I just don't feel a spirit. But normally I feel a holiness when I walk into a Catholic church.
Okay.
And so God to me is very holy. Jesus is probably the most personal aspect of me. There's probably Jesus, and then my family is probably the most personal thing about me and my spirit. And so when I was growing up, Jesus was love.
Okay.
Jesus was, that was the way that I was raised. And when I came to really feel that Jesus was love and know that Jesus was love, anything opposite of that didn't make sense to me. I mean, I didn't see how Jesus could love everybody all the time and then be mad at you, or be mad at me over something that I did. Not that I didn't worry about that because, the messages were, oh, Jesus is, or God is going to be angry or something like that. But the bigger part of me never really believed that. Okay. And then I've just always felt a connection, and I've had so many blessings from the time I was a child that affirmed the love of God.
Wow.
And then I'm trying to think of what the first real loss was. I mean, the first huge loss in my life was my dad, but we had a lot of losses in our family, like my grandfather and, different people passed growing up. So I always felt a connection to death. So death meant, that's the realm where God is.
Okay.
So I felt a connection there. And so then when my father passed when I was 21, well, I wanted to continue a connection with him. So in fact, I remember wanting to, because my father could be, sort of hardcore, and he was a cop. And I remember, but he was a good person. I mean, he believed in doing the right thing.
Okay.
So I didn't have any doubt he was going to heaven, but I thought that, he might, be lost. So, on the journey.
Case he has problems getting there.
Right. He might be lost on the journey. So okay. I sort of wanted to hold his hand as he went up to heaven and then, be able to come back. Wow. This was like something I imagined in my spirit at 21.
And so you said, the breakthrough for that was what for you?
Well, it was a combination of things. I know I'm saying a lot, but it was a combination of things. It was a combination of experiencing death, in our family through different relatives and people that we know. Yeah. That big death, of my father passing. But also my mother, I used to wonder until very recently, what came first? Like, was I born loving God, or did that come through what my mother instilled in me? Because there was one thing about her, she loved God. Okay. And I mean, I said that at her funeral, I said that's just, the woman loved God. And so I loved what she loved,
okay.
And, but I now know that I was born this way and that my mom just enhanced it in me, because I'm a part of her.
I see.
So
now, was your father close to God? Did you feel like he had a relationship with God and an awareness of God in his life? Did he an influence at all in your spirituality?
I think he had an awareness of God. He wasn't close to God like my mom and I were. As I said, he was a detective and he saw, all kinds of things, that jaded him. But it's funny because one of his friends and colleagues had wrote a book about, his friend was, I think, the first police officer, the first black police officer in Buffalo, where I'm from. And he wrote a book. And in his book, he refers to my father as this devout Catholic, and he was not a devout Catholic. I had to say, that's not accurate. Okay. We were Catholic, but he wasn't devout, but he did believe in doing the right thing. He would always say, never take food off another man's table. That was a big thing. Never take food off another man's table. And that's what I think of in terms of doing the right thing by people.
Well, that's still a positive, good influence that even, passed down through your father that can coupled with that what you got from your mom.
Oh,
makes a huge big
He's
difference in how you are today. Because I know that love is really big for you. I know that, and you've mentioned it several times even here. So what then is love? What does it look like, feel like to Adrianne?
It's an energy. It's a beautiful energy. It's the best way I can describe this, and I don't have children. The best way that I can imagine to describe it is if you have a baby, and there's you before you have a baby. There's you before your baby's born.
Okay.
And there's you when your baby's born and you're looking at your baby. And I don't have children.
Okay.
But that's the best way that I can imagine describing love. In fact, I really feel that the most sacred relationship is between a mother and her child. I really do. I think that's the closest thing to God. I think that's the closest thing to the holiness of God. And I say that understanding that everyone doesn't have a wonderful relationship with their parent. But it's an energy. It's an energy that I feel if I'm praying and I'm really get to a place of meditation and I can feel a love that I know doesn't compare to the love that I would feel when I'm no longer in this form. But I feel a love that I almost can't bear sometimes, where I have to come out of a meditation because it's just so beautiful.
Okay.
So it's, does that answer your question at all?
It does. When you related it to mother and child and that look, that feeling you first get, it sounds like you were leaning towards like an unconditional feeling.
And I say mother and child, but I mean father and child too. I remember not long ago, I brought that up to my nephew, and he instantly, who has a 2-year-old son, and he instantly knew what I was saying.
Okay.
So I know he understood the kind of love I was talking about.
Okay. Wow. Well, that's a good description. So thank you. Well, so let's go back and talk some more about the podcast. So I know that you have done some wonderful interviews so far. You've had some great, really beautiful people on the podcast, and you seem to be enjoying them.
I do.
I certainly have enjoyed listening to them. What would you say has been the greatest joy so far for you doing these podcasts?
Oh, my. There's so many things. There's the conversation. There's, I really love editing the podcast. It's a grind. I do love it.
I'm looking at you with my eyebrows lifted, thinking.
It's a grind. And at the same time, I just like it. I love the creative aspect of it.
Okay.
And I just, I love the idea of putting these, what I think are fruitful conversations out here. And I love that they're all different, or most of them are different.
Yeah, they are.
So I really like that. I feel that I am accomplishing what I wanted to accomplish in that regard of showing how we're all, we have all these different types of backgrounds that we come from when it comes to how we view God. And the feedback that I'm getting is that they still resonate for people.
That's so true. I mean, I get excited, like learning about the guests that's coming up. And even when I read something or you mention something about that guest, and I'm like, I may not have ever experienced a person like that in my life. It seems exciting enough to want to listen to it. And then, though their backgrounds are so different than what I could be used to, there's always this one thing sometimes in them, or this, thing, something in their life that I could relate to. And I guess that's the whole idea of it, really, is to find something that you can relate to show how we are. We're different, but we're not. We're really
exactly.
Not. So, yes, great job. You're doing an excellent job.
Thank you. And I enjoy, I have interviewed quite a few people that I know,
Okay.
but I'm learning new things.
Yeah.
Even interviewing you and learning about, your life as a pastor's wife was really enlightening in the things that you've experienced. So
Awesome.
I enjoy that.
That's good. So that brings me to my next question. If you could interview anyone in the world on your next podcast,
Oh my
who
goodness.
would it be and why?
Wow. Well,
Now,
I
I
wish
know you
you-
know all these like names and folks that I'm like, I have never heard of them. So you're going to have to explain.
there's
who this
3
is.
people that I would love to interview, and one is not living.
Okay.
So I would love to have been able to interview. There's 3 people that I would love to interview, and one of them is not living.
Okay.
Gosh, I do wish you had asked me this question beforehand. Said, hey, I'm going to ask you this question.
Heads up.
But I would love, in an ideal situation, to have been able to interview Wayne Dyer. That's a man I've shared with my friends.
I had a sense you'd say him.
Did
Yeah,
you?
Yeah. Yeah.
I have shared with friends that he's a man that, well, first of all, he was a man's man and a woman's man.
Okay. That's
So
the best kind of man.
That's the best kind of man.
Okay.
All right. And he was someone that I just believed what he said.
Wow.
I felt what he said. What he said resonated for me
Sure.
so much that if he introduced a new concept, I just believed what he said. And I would go with it and discover within my spirit that that was indeed true.
Okay.
And so it was just, I was getting ready to say, it was just great to interview him. So in my dreams, maybe I did interview him. So that's one person I would love to
Okay.
interview. I would love to interview Marianne Williamson. She's been someone I have admired and really a role model in my dreams for years, long before I came to be doing this podcast, long before she decided that she was going to run for president.
Right, sure.
She's just someone that is who I aspire to be in some ways. She's very different from. She has a personality that's different from my personality, but I love how she is so strong and matter of fact, and she takes no prisoners, and she believes in doing the right thing. And one time, and I'm getting off on a tangent,
okay. You're good.
but one time I heard her talk about, how people can ghost you. Well, not you, you're married. So, but how in a relationship that can happen where someone can just not call you anymore.
Right. Don't show up. Don't you don't
right.
hear anything from them.
Right. And I've always felt like, who does that? I've always felt like that's just wrong. That's so inconsiderate. It's not something, now it's easy to do. It's something that would be easy for me to do with someone, but it's not something.
Easy
it's not
to ghost someone.
Yeah, I mean that's the easy way out.
Okay, I see.
But that's not the way that I want to treat someone.
Right.
And so one day during one of her talks, she spoke to that, and it was something I always felt. And she just was like, that's just no way to be. That's not okay.
Okay.
That's what she said. That's not okay.
Right.
And so she has given me strength and empowered me to say that's not okay about certain things.
Wow. Okay.
So a lot of strength that I have, I think, in recent months has come about from feeling I have permission in some way, if that makes any
that's
sense.
Important.
Yeah.
That's very
Yeah.
important.
Or that I don't need permission.
Don't need permission.
So, so the third person is Deepak Chopra, who I've mentioned recently.
I know you've seen him recently.
Yeah, that was real. That was such a treat.
Okay.
That was such a treat, and I really enjoy how he talks about formlessness, and he goes deep into that during his talks sometimes, and it just just feel, I feel the power of all of us as spirits
Yes.
when I listen to his talks and how deeply he goes into how we're connected
Okay.
to God and spirit and all of that.
Wow. That's interesting.
Yeah.
Okay. All right. Well, I totally understand. That was good. So, what do you think God calls you to do for yourself and for others through your work?
Wow. Honestly, I think that my calling is to let people know that God loves us no matter what. It's something that I have had to come to know and embrace in order for me to have the trust and be in surrender about my life
Okay.
and path. And I really had to ask myself that question that you just asked me, because the people that I just mentioned,
Yes.
those three and others, I've realized that so many of the people that speak to me spiritually,
Yes.
everyone all says the same thing, really, but they have a little detail that they focus on. And so I realized that mine is that God loves us.
Yeah.
You know, I know that in many faiths, there's an idea that God doesn't love us or that God judges us. That's not my experience.
Okay.
Not to say I don't have things that happen, but that's comes about through my own doing.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, and in today's time, I think that's probably needed. People need to hear that. Would you say people need to hear that even
I
more
do.
today?
I do. Because, I mean, when you're going through something, when you're feeling really, really low, all you want to know is that someone loves you. And then to know that God loves you. I mean, goodness.
Yeah.
That can be really healing and really comforting.
Absolutely.
And there are times I suggest, if you're awake in the middle of the night sometime and you start reading something that speaks to you, I mean, maybe it's the Bible, maybe it's just a spiritual book. For me, it's a Course in Miracles, but it could be the Bible also, or something else. I'm really into Khalil Gibran. It could be one of his books.
Okay.
God, I mean, it's like I'll have this thought in my mind that something's troubling me. This could also happen in the morning often too. But something could be troubling me, and I go to just a particular spot in whatever, a book is, and it's answering that thing. And it's sometimes I'm so amazed that I'm literally feel like I'm in a conversation, like I'm in a conversation with you.
Sure.
But it's in my thoughts.
Yeah.
And I'm like, what? Wow. I mean,
blows your mind.
it blows my mind. And it's an awesome feeling too, to feel the love of God.
Yeah.
It's an awesome feeling. And sometimes, I do get insecure. I do get in doubt, if things aren't going right. And I know, well, is God going to bless me? Is God going to help me work this out? And he does. But I do worry like anybody else. But I think because I have been brought through my own personal struggles that aren't any worse than anyone else's, but they're personal, to me. And I know the love of God, and I just want to impart that to anyone that wants to hear it.
Yeah. Yeah. When do you think, like looking back on your life, you came into this assurance of knowing the love of God, knowing who God is for you, understanding your spiritual walk? Like, can you pinpoint a time where that enlightenment just occurred for you?
It's been a process, and I think part of it is because even though I do like to be social, I'm kind of a loner. I was the youngest. My brothers, I have two older brothers, and they were older than me, so a lot of times I had alone time. And I've just had that carried over into my adult life.
Okay.
So it's been a process, this relationship with God. You know, I mentioned my mom. And so I would say in my 20s, I started reciting the rosary. And the rosary I discovered would take me into meditation, which created a new relationship.
Okay.
So prayer takes me into meditation.
Okay.
So that was an aspect of a relationship with God. But also when my mom passed, and just the journey that I had with her in the months prior to her passing away was, I couldn't have asked for anything more. It was just such a big blessing for the both of us, and I think for our family. But it was me and my mom who were, here in the same city.
Okay.
And it was just incredible. So it just, and then when she was gone, I was lost for a few years after she was gone. I couldn't believe that God had just left me alone like that.
Wow.
My grandmother had passed about a year and a half before her.
Okay.
And it was really the three of us that were here, as a support system for each other for maybe about 5 years, because I had been living here and then they came.
Yeah.
And so I felt really lost without my mother.
Sure.
And I really had to decide, and I've shared this, I think, maybe on the first podcast. I really had to decide that if I was going to go on living, then I was going to live an authentic life. And I didn't feel like I was really living an authentic life.
Okay.
And
what do you mean by that?
I was in relationships I didn't need to be in.
Okay.
And romantic relationships are a huge part of my life when I'm in one.
Okay.
And I was in relationships I just didn't need to be in, that weren't healthy for me. And I was talking to a girlfriend one day, and we had reconnected, and she was telling me about a divorce that she had been through, and she was in a great place. And she just seemed so authentic to me. And she said, "So how are you doing? What are you up to?" And I couldn't give authenticity to her.
Wow.
And that was when I knew, I don't want to be this.
Yeah.
I want to be authentic.
Okay.
And that's the only way I can really continue without my mother anyway.
Okay.
And that's the only way I could see to get to happy. And so
what was that process for
that
you?
process? Well, that was, I had discovered A Course in Miracles through reading Marianne Williamson's books in 2005, which was before my mother had passed. And then she passed in 2006, and I started reading this book a little more. And it's hard to read at first. It seems like a foreign language if you're just looking at it for the first time. And the more I read it, I saw, and it started to sink in, I saw that it was really speaking to what I've always believed, that God is love. Mm-hmm. But it was saying this in an exponential way. And I kept looking for some but in the book. God is love, but God is love, but he don't love you all the time, something like that. And so it has a Christian slant to it. Okay. Although, as I've mentioned many times, people come to this book that are from all different faiths. So that book, and studying this book, reading this book, absorbing everything that's in there, speaks to everything I've always really thought in my spirit. Okay. And it has helped me to love myself. I was just talking about this the other day, about how one of my goals this is 2019, I would say around 2011, 12, one of my goals was to get to a place of self-love. And I can say that I am there. Wow. I am there. Awesome. And I'm going to cry. And it is a result of this book, just telling you, just trying to undo all the the ideas
Yeah.
that we have about ourselves, that these ideas are not true, and that, God only sees us in one way.
Absolutely.
And so that has been my path. That's my path. Is something that I try to remember. I sometimes forget. Does that answer your question? Because I can't remember.
No, that does. It does. I want to hear more about how you see and feel that your life has changed now that you've come into this enlightenment. Who is Adrianne today?
I am a person who does still have fears, who does still have doubts, who chooses to trust.
Okay.
There's no way I would have the blessings in my life if it wasn't for God. I mean, my blessings have come out of nowhere.
Yeah.
Nowhere. And I would say my parents, I can't believe I'm about to say this on this podcast because I don't know if I've ever said this out loud to anyone, but I can trace most things in my life back to my parents, like most experiences. Like I could trace knowing you, I could trace that back to my father.
Wow.
I mean, it's crazy.
Yeah.
And I don't know if other people have the same, could do this if they chose to or what, I could trace something else back to, I could trace the group that I attend, which I started attending in 2008. My mother passed in 2006. I could trace that back to my mother. There's just so many things that happened to me that is a result of God and that are connected to them, and that are just not a result of anything I did.
Wow.
They're just not. So I found that if I just do what I think I should do, if I just act as if I just pursue what I think I should pursue, then the real opportunity will come from out of the blue, not necessarily from something I did. So most of the jobs I've had have not come from me applying for the jobs, for example. Although I'll apply here, I'll apply there, I'll just be on my path, being diligent. But the real opportunity comes from some big blessing.
Okay.
And
now, how does all of that tie into how you would describe who Adrianne is today? Like, give me a little more about if you were a third party and you had to say, who is Adrianne? What is she? Who is she? What is she about?
I'm about a person that loves my family, loves my friends, loves God. Those are the things that are so important to me. I am a person that wants to be in peace. And I've had the luxury. One of my blessings is, although I've always wanted to have a family, I've always wanted to be married. And I'm not opposed to that, at all. I still, love the idea of, a house full of people.
Yeah.
I think. But but what am I trying to say? I've had the luxury, in spite of not having that, I've had this luxury of being able to work on myself, to cultivate my relationship with God, to evolve in my relationship with God.
That's awesome.
That's been a big blessing.
Okay.
And to grow from my mistakes. And learn from my mistakes. And I'm still learning. It's a process.
Yeah, sure.
Being in trusting God has been a challenge for me. Like total trust, 100% trust has been a challenge. Like I can trust about 85%. But getting to 100 has been a process, and I'm close to it.
Yeah. Well, you know,
I'm
a lot of
close to
people
it.
struggle with that, giving him 100% of our trust. That's
Yeah.
normal.
Yeah.
And so I totally understand that. And that any one of us could say that same, very same thing.
Mm-hmm.
You were talking earlier about, so we know that the Course in Miracles has helped you kind of reestablish or give you that foundational
Mm-hmm.
understanding of who you are in God and what that means to you. What are some of the, and you mentioned that your prayer has led to your meditation. So
Mm-hmm.
what would you say are some of the other ways that you have, how do you connect with God? Like, give me a day-to-day of how Adrianne connects with God and that power source for you.
Well, so most days, not every day. I want it to be every day, but I would say most days of the week when I wake up. So I have to get up and take the dog out. So which means I have to put something on and all that. So what I'll do is I will turn something on my phone. There's a prayer that I really love that Wayne Dyer shares. It's on YouTube, and he repeats it. And it's not, the prayer is from the book Three Magic Words.
Okay.
And it starts out, I know that I am pure spirit. And then after that, I think it's deep inside me is a universal voice, God, of which I am a part. And it's a long prayer. It's so beautiful. And then he repeats it. It's a 60-minute recording, and he's just repeating this prayer. And he actually suggests that you listen to this prayer or read it before you go to sleep at night. I listen to it in the morning as I'm getting up and trying to get myself together to come downstairs, take the dog out, do everything I need to do before I can sit down and open up a book, a reading. For some people, it might be the Bible. I will open up A Course in Miracles, and I'll read something in there. Sometimes I'll journal, which is really a big communication with God for me. I in my journal, I say, "Dear Holy Spirit," and I write what I'm feeling, and then
That's your communication exactly directly to.
yes, and then and things come to me that I'm not expecting to come out of me, and then I'll start saying prayers, and the prayers will take me into a meditation.
Nice.
And so what I want to get to, which I haven't been very successful with, is to make time, whether it's every hour or every 2 hours, to throughout the day, to just take 5 minutes to read and to pray, because that can help me, and I think all of us, to just not go crazy and get so absorbed in the day-to-day, and where we forget who we are. And I don't want to forget who I am, which I can do that. I can forget what's going on. I can forget what's real and get absorbed in an issue or something like that. So
with all that's going on, even in media and things like that, it can kind of pull you away from that being centered in who you are. So to speak, sometimes.
Right. And before, I just want to add that often before I go to sleep at night, I might put something on YouTube and just cast it to my TV.
Okay.
Some kind of chakra meditation or music, that something that relates to a chakra, and go to sleep to that, or I might read something and go to sleep to that. So I often do that too. So it's that middle of the day thing I need to work on.
Wow, I see. Middle of the day. Well, I have just one more question before I go into the last, those special 3 questions that you normally ask people whom you interview. I'm going to ask you those. But the question that I was wondering was about, I love that you are being so transparent with your answers. I know this is a little challenging for you to
Little
open up so
bit,
much
little bit.
because you're always on the other end of things. So this is really exciting just to see you in this way. But I know that knowing you and having known you, I know that things like exercising and eating right and just there's this whole healthy aspect to you and your life and your lifestyle. When you've done marathons and all of that. And I think all of that ties into who you are as a person. And it does something for you, I think, on a whole different spiritual level. Talk about that a little bit, what all of that means for you and why.
Wow. So it's so funny, excuse me, that you bring this up because I am coming to a new awareness that I haven't shared.
Okay.
One thing is that I have always wanted to be healthy because in my family and extended family, just health issues have come up with high blood pressure and heart and things like that. So I'd say since the 90s, I've wanted to be healthy. And I started running when I was living in New York, and I was inspired by people who would run the New York City Marathon.
Wow.
And the building across the street, I think it was Chase Manhattan across the street, they would list the runners, of the marathon. And I wanted my name to be on there one day.
Yeah.
And I haven't ever run the New York City Marathon, but that did inspire me to start running. And then when I moved to Atlanta, since I wasn't in a walkable city like I was in New York, I picked up the frequency of running and the distance of running. And then when my mother passed, before she passed, my brothers and my nieces and nephews would come to visit, as she was in decline. And so she passed in the month of September, and that following spring was a marathon that I wanted to run in honor of her. And I asked my one brother to come support me. My other brother sort of trained me long distance. He was living in Alaska at the time. And then it turned out that, everybody came, nieces, nephews, my brothers, they came to support me. And it just turned into this family thing that we've done almost every year. So, and it is, my brother Jeff, my late brother Jeff, would talk about this runner's high that I have experienced sometimes. It is quite incredible. And I do feel like I'm in another place. I do feel connected. It is a way for me to decompress and release my stress, just running in general. So the thing is that the new awareness is that I have this issue with food right now where I have these food allergies, and I've always been a picky eater. And I really think that from the research that I've been doing, and I'm not a doctor, obviously, so I don't know that this is 100%, but I think that these allergies are coming about. They might be tied to my adrenal glands. And when I look up adrenal glands, they are related to stress. And so while I might outwardly not look like I'm experiencing stress, inside I'm experiencing stress about a situation. And I think what it's tied to is maybe doing something I don't want to do. I do it anyway. And so sometimes I'm not even eating, even though I might eat something and I know, this is going to affect me with an allergy. I might not be eating and I can feel allergies. I can feel these allergies coming about. And so I think that my spirit is telling me that God is calling me to go to an even different place of being true to myself in a deeper way. Don't do what I don't want to do. And I think that's true for all of us. That's not to say that if you had something that you wanted me to do for you, and maybe it's not something I really want to do, but I do want to do it for you because I want to do it for you. That's totally different.
Right.
You know what I mean?
Yes.
So if it's something that I just don't want to do, then as hard as it is to say no, I think my spirit and God is calling on me to say no, because that is what is keeping me healthy.
Because you're struggling with this thing internally, because it's not really something that you are obliged to.
And I think that's very much tied to spirit and God for me.
Okay.
And I feel conflicted about, but this is just a new awareness I've come to in the last couple of days, and so I'm working it out.
Okay.
And did that make sense?
It does. I mean, it's a good thing that you are acknowledging this. And I'm sure you'll make the adjustments accordingly. Very interesting. Okay. So those 3 questions that we want to get to, I think I can remember 2. I'll go with the ones that I can kind of remember. Okay. All right. I think the one is, are you a seeker or a healer? Which would you consider yourself, or both? Can you be both?
I think you can be both.
Okay.
I know clearly I'm a seeker.
Okay.
I'm definitely a seeker. I want to know. I want to know everything.
I could see that.
I want to know everything.
That's the media interviewer person in you.
Well, it drives my family crazy.
Okay.
I ask too many questions. And so I don't stop when it comes to God. I want to know. I want to understand. So I'm definitely a seeker. Okay. If anyone, if I heal anyone in any way, at any time, I'm truly honored and grateful to do that. But I know that I'm a seeker.
It's funny that you say that, because yes, I do see you as that person who definitely wants to know. Questions. We know she's going to ask questions. She comes with questions. But at the same time, that love side of you, that other half of Adrianne, is such a healing aspect to that, you know. So it's almost like you really do have dual purposes in your life you may not be aware of.
Oh my,
that's
thank
just coming
you.
from me. Anyway. Okay. The other question. If you could sit on the porch across from God and ask him 2 questions that he would give you a complete understanding and answer to, what would those 2 questions be? I'm surprised you're not prepared for this question.
Well, I do kind of have an answer, but I don't know how to put it in a nutshell.
Okay.
Let me see. It would be about our oneness. I don't know.
Do expound.
It's an out-of-the-box thought.
Okay.
So it's about our oneness. I think that we are all one. I think that, well, I had this experience, and I don't know if I've shared this on this podcast, and if I haven't, I don't know if I should.
Okay. Well, you're getting ready to now, so people, here we go.
So one day I was interviewing someone for a freelance job because I was editor of a magazine.
Okay. And we should tell people that you have a background in media.
Yes.
So, okay.
Yes.
I don't know if that's ever come out in any of your other podcasts.
Yes.
Okay.
I'm not sure, actually.
I don't know if you've ever shared that you're writing history.
I'm a journalist. I'm a writer and an editor. Long time. And so a few years ago, maybe 4 years ago, I met someone at a coffee shop at Starbucks, a young woman. She was white, in her early 20s, and meeting her for the first time, we sit down. I'm talking to her about writing for the publication. And I'm thinking to myself, where do I know her from? Who does she remind me of? Okay. And after about, I a few minutes or 10 minutes or something, I realized that her spirit was the same as a friend of mine who was and is 40 something year old Black man.
Okay.
And that I was experiencing the same spirit. I don't know how to, I mean, I know that sounds like wild, but it was so affirming to me that it was an example of, yes, we're all one. Oh my God. They have the same spirit. Wow. They could not be more different. I just told you what she looked like and what he looked like.
Like him reincarnated into a woman.
But they both exist.
But they both
at
exist.
the same time.
So it's not reincarnation, actually.
But
they both exist.
Right. And so if I could...
He has a female twin. A white female twin.
Yes. And so, the whole... my whole idea of God is that an understanding, my personal understanding, is that we are all one. Although we are looking across from each other right now, we think we're two people, but we're really one spirit.
Wow.
And so if this is true, I guess I want to talk to God about how we don't know this. Like, let's say I'm right with what I just described. So how come they don't know that? How come is it possible for the human side of us to know this, if this is true? Or
is it possible for us to sometimes refuse to accept things that we probably feel or sense anyway, but because it blows our mind to even accept that, we refuse it and we just push it away, that thought that, that whatever it is that kind of tells us that, even here today. And then many of us really probably do know that in our spirit, but we refuse to accept that you and I could be from the same,
exactly.
So,
and sometimes when I'm trying to play this game with myself sometimes now, where if I'm around someone who's disagreeable, I will want to say to myself, look at me acting that way right now. When I'm looking at that other person and like say that person's name is Susan and I'll say, look at me acting look at that aspect of me in Susan right now. Wow. Or look how I'm, just look how I'm behaving right now.
See yourself in that person, literally.
So I can see that part of me over there is behaving that way. And isn't that interesting? I'm trying to, connect with oneness that way, because the whole idea of spirituality, as I understand it and experience it with A Course in Miracles, is if I can love myself and forgive myself for anything that I think I did, then I can easily love and have forgiveness in you.
Okay.
So, but anyway, the other question would be just about my idea of heaven and what happens when we die and what are they doing there? What are you guys doing? So I would have many questions I would ask God, but because I've lost so many people and I just want to know. And if I ever talk to an intuitive and I want to connect, with someone, I never ask this question that I always want to know because I'm so busy asking other things. But I want to know, what are you doing? How do you spend your time? Just
doing up there all day.
Yes.
Okay.
So I kind of want to have a sense of what's going on.
And you want to know now before you get there. You don't have to wait till you get there. Okay.
Right. But I do tell my friends, I'm not coming back. I'm trying to get this right.
Well, that's good.
In this lifetime, because I am not coming back. Okay. I just want to be with God. That's it.
I'm sure once we get a wolf, that's pretty much all we'll want to do.
What say you, Lanada? What say you?
Well, it's not. I love it when you talk about some of these things because it's so different from me. It's so different than what I'm used to or how I grew up or my spiritual understanding sometimes
Yes.
of things.
Uh-huh.
And that's, I think, when you mention intuitiveness and things like that, as much as my eyes just go open and I'm like, they go wide and I'm like, oh my goodness, wait, what? And but I think all of that is what encompasses who you are. And we always connect still on this other level
Yes.
of our spirituality, that love part of it, and that understanding that there's so many paths that people take. I certainly may feel that there is one path to God or to Christ or whatever, but I know that you've come to your understanding of God in this particular way, and you still experience and appreciate all these other things.
Right.
And that has opened up my eyes to a different experience as well of our relationship and to sometimes of God. And I think that that's what makes the beauty of our friendship so fun. Even though it scares me sometimes what she's going to say, or what, it's like I'm questioning, wait, where we're going? Where are you taking me? It's like, wait, what? But I just wanted to tell you that that's what makes you all of who you are. And it all just eclectically leads back to love for you, and I think that's just amazing.
It does. I have to say, I hope I don't lose my train of thought. That if two people feel like, if we each have a different path to God, and it's such a loving path, then for me, God is not going to say I'm going to take one and not the other.
Okay,
that's just. For me, I don't see that. The other thing for me is that I think all of us, myself included, we allow ourselves to experience such a small aspect of the power of God. Yeah. And so if I feel the Spirit of God in some way, if I feel if I feel intuition, which we all have intuition. Absolutely. You have intuition, right? Absolutely. That you have.
Yeah, and we call it, something different, I guess, when you're in the church, So they have a different term for it. That they consider it. They call it discernment. Discernment.
That's so funny.
That's what they call it. It's like, I discern that spirit wasn't right, or that's so.
Yes. So if you have discernment, oh my gosh, I love it. If you have discernment, then why just limited to that? Why is it limited to that? There's so many, that discernment that we use
takes us different places.
It takes us different places. And so I'm
we don't necessarily always have to be fearful about.
Right. But I don't see why be fearful of it at all. Right. And I'm interested in going to those places.
Well, it's funny that you said that, because I think sometimes that's what keeps us from experiencing God in a different way sometimes, because we don't know how he's going to work through that experience, that to show himself. I always speak of this paradigm shift that I gone through, like after divorce and things like that, not to take away from this
sure
interview.
Absolutely.
But after having that experience, and I think I talked about it when you interviewed me, is when I felt more free to have that shift. If that makes any sense. After coming out of that, building other relationships, extended relationships, gaining new friends, things like that, definitely as you've come into my life and we've experienced things together, that's just become such a more colorful, beautiful experience. And I think God is in that as well. He's certainly in our friendship as well. And it has not taken me any further away from his presence, from his truth as it relates to my life. So anyway, I just wanted to bring that up. That I call it the eclecticness of you.
Well, let me say something also. You sharing that had me thinking of something. So when I have many Bibles. Okay, I have many Bibles, and one of them that I treasure is on my bedstand, and I received it when my father passed, because the church that he was, his funeral service was right beside police headquarters where he worked. And they gave me the Bible, and it has, his title,
nice.
and all of that in it.
Yeah.
So this Bible, I mean, the binder on it is all worn and torn and everything. So in wanting to be closer to him spiritually, I read this Bible front to back, in the years after for several years after he passed. And me being about love, I took the love from the Bible. I've been reading the Bible since I was a child, okay?
Right.
And so I always just took the love. So I got to a point where, in feeling a new presence of God in my life, a heightened awareness as a result of being so absorbed in the Word, that I would want things to happen. So I would ask God for proof. Okay. So
be careful with that.
Oh yeah. And so that's what I was getting to, like my lesson, like nothing bad ever happened, but it was just my expectation. So I would say, okay, God, if I see this person, like at work, we have the cafeteria. I was living in New York at the time. So I would see somebody in the cafeteria occasionally. So I would say, if I go to the cafeteria for breakfast today and I see this particular person, then that's proof of whatever. Whatever I decided I wanted to be proof of. So somebody I might not see very often, right? So then I would see that person, or if I wanted someone to call me, if I wanted a boyfriend to call me that I hadn't heard from, and I would say, God, I want this person to call me. And if they call me, then it's proof of this. And I want them to call me at a particular time.
Oh my goodness.
Okay. And this person
would
call me.
What the proof is.
I did that. That person would call me at a particular time.
Okay.
I remember walking across the office. There were 3 desks in this office I worked in, and I was at one desk. Which wasn't mine. My desk was across the office, and the phone rang. As I'm going to answer it, I am thinking it is this person I want to talk to, this guy I want to talk to, who was ignoring me. Okay. And it was him. All right. And that was my proof of whatever, but what I found was that that's not wise for me to do because of the expectation. I'm coming up with these expectations like, God, if you do A, then it means B. I'm making that decision rather than just asking God, for what I want or for my highest good.
Okay.
So that was a lesson for me, in my younger years.
Okay.
So that was a growth opportunity. The opportunities.
It
showed that I was indeed connected. In the way I wanted to be connected, but I had to learn, that proof. And I don't think that God cared. It's just not the way that it worked for me, and I don't think it really works that way at all.
Oh, God,
but I don't think he was.
Let me have fun with her for a little while.
I don't think he was mad or anything. He probably had fun with it, So.
Don't we sometimes wish that we just understood truly the humor of God, or could see him, and understand we know that we can, so for the most part, but really understand what he's doing and thinking at the time when we're doing something or saying something crazy.
Yes.
I know no one else who only accepts the love parts of the Bible doesn't accept the parts where he just kind of
you don't
and destroys or passes down.
Right. Now I'm building an audience. I don't want to make the audience I'm building mad.
I cut out that part.
Yeah.
I just want the love part.
But because God is love. So that's me, and it has worked out in my life. But this is what I wanted to say, where I don't want to make anyone mad, but I'm going to say it anyway. So please,
we
this
probably
is just
already have anyway. That's okay.
But God is in the Bible, obviously. But for me, these words were provided by man, a human being. So I don't think that they are error free.
Okay.
So that's all I'll say about that.
Okay.
And this podcast is about having an open mind. So if I say something that doesn't agree with you, that's what this is about. It's about us accepting, each other. It's about us accepting each other, all in spirit and in love.
Thank you.
So
All
Thank
right.
you.
Thank you. We already ended. So, what would you want to impart? What wisdom do you think you would want to impart on the generation today if you left here tomorrow or had to leave some stream of wisdom? What would you think that would, what would you want that to be?
I think that it's not as hard as you think to go within and deal with your issues or your problems or whatever that thing is that really bothers you, that you're hung up on, that you feel horrible about, or that gives you a lot of pain, brings you a lot of pain. It is not as bad as you think. To go inside and to dwell in that and heal in it, to be in it. There can be a real resistance to do that. And it's really the only way to heal. And it can be scary. It can be, oh God, I don't want to go there. But it's really not as bad as you think. It's really not. And I'll tell you, I think I brought this up maybe in another podcast, but I was talking to a healer, an energy healer, on the phone, and we were talking about something that was really hurting me, and he wanted me to go spend at least 20 minutes a day doing a meditation where I just sat in my pain. And I'm telling you, that wasn't what I was interested in doing.
It doesn't sound appealing, but yeah.
I was not interested in doing it at all.
Okay.
But, I said I was willing to. And and he said, when you get to that feeling, just be in it. And I was astonished how I felt connected to God. It took me to a much deeper communication and connection with God. I was really astonished, and it has helped me to heal. So I would just say, and my nephew, Justin, I think he doesn't necessarily describe this to the extent that I just have, but he talks about internalizing things.
Sure.
And just how it's not helpful. It's not helpful to internalize. It's helpful to go inside and to deal with it.
Okay.
So
interesting. Very interesting. Well, I cannot tell you how much I have appreciated and enjoyed this experience. I do have one more question. I said 3, but I have one more that I want to end this podcast with, and that is, what would the Adrianne now tell the Adrianne of 20 years ago, of 25 years ago, if she could talk to her today?
Oh my, I'm not crying. I'm not going to cry. That's hard to put into words.
I'm sure.
It's really something I've been thinking about. It's funny you asked me that. I think the Adrianne now would say, you will get there. You are love. You're going to be okay. That's the best I can say right now, but I'll tell you, I was reflecting on that. I was reflecting on that in the last few days, just thinking, wow, I'm so glad I don't have to go through all that stuff again. Just coming through stuff. I mean, I've had a blessed life, but just coming through becoming me.
Yes.
It hasn't been easy. So I would just say, you're going to get there, and you are love. Don't let anyone tell you otherwise. And it's something my mom she always said something she always said, and wanted to believe it. So I do believe it.
You do?
I do believe it. Absolutely.
Say it one more time.
I do believe it.
Okay. Affirmations.
So let me say thank you so much for, I don't know if I liked exposing myself like this, but it's what I asked my guests to do.
It's what you asked your guests to do, and thanks for having me.
So thank you so much. Thank you, Lanada.
Thank you.
Thank you for joining us. Remember to like us on Facebook, follow us on Instagram, listen to all of our episodes on our podcast channel on YouTube and Apple Podcasts, and send me that email at letstarthealingpodcast@gmail.com. Let's start healing.